Let us turn our focus on vector control. This is a courtesy of WHO by Mary-Ann Groepe. For the outline of this topic today, we will look into introduction, what a vector is, the types of vectors, vector-borne diseases, the vector control strategies, surveillance monitoring of vectors, the role of the entomologist, integrated vector management. The following facts form a basic information that you should know and acquaint yourself with regarding vectors and their associated diseases. Vector-borne diseases are generally very dangerous. They can reach epidemic form very quickly in a niche of time if not controlled. When vector control is not in place, then you need to improve diagnostic facilities and treatment. Such, of course, do not come cheap and can add a very heavy financial burden to the already ailing systems of any government, particularly in most developing countries in Africa. But then, what is a vector? By definition, a vector is an insect or any animal that transmits a disease to other animals or humans, such as mosquitoes, flies, ticks, lice, fleas, and some form of freshwater aquatic snails, etc. There are currently two types of vectors that are of public health importance. These are mechanical vectors that transmit pathogens by transporting them on their feet or mouth parts, for example, houseflies, cockroaches, you name them. The other form is a biological vectors. This type of vectors involve life cycle. Vector passes through a series of steps before maturity. It is transmitted to human or animal host during blood meal feeding. It carries pathogens that can multiply within host bodies that can be delivered to new hosts by biting, for example, mosquitoes and ticks. The basic difference between biological transmission and mechanical transmission by this vector is that in biological transmission, the agent develops and or propagates within the vector, while in mechanical transmission, the simple transfer of agents from one infected host or contaminated substrate to a susceptible host occurs. In these slides, the depicted table shows the different vectors and their associated diseases they transmit, as well as the recommended control measures to be instituted. Take, for example, on the far left-hand side, you will see the different vectors, including the mosquitoes, the tsetse flies, sandy fly, black flies, etc. And then in the middle column, you will see, for example, the different mosquitoes, Anopheles, Culex, Aedes, the different diseases they transmit. For example, malaria, filariasis, yellow fever, dengue, Zika. And also on the far right, the chemical, personal protection, vaccination, vector control. Those are the control measures institute that you should be familiar with. Again, in this table too, more different vectors and their associated diseases they transmit, as well as the recommended control measures to be instituted, are depicted. Read more about other vectors and the diseases they transmit from the recommended sources provided in the learning guide and the sources. There are different strategies that can be employed to control vectors. The use of insecticides on larger scales, such as pyrethroids, DDT. Read more about DDT ban in some countries due to its negative impact on health and environment, but very effective. Carbamides, for example, are effective in vector control. At homes, space spraying by common insecticides such as Doom, Target, Raid, Diroge are also very effective in controlling vectors like flies, mosquitoes, cockroaches, and other flying or crawling insects. Larval control by removing or treating accumulated stagnant waters in old tires, cans, and old containers or ponds can be effective in controlling vectors. Biological control, read more about this control measure. Environmental management as a collective responsibility by affected countries or by Department of Agriculture and Environmental Affairs can effectively work together to control vectors. Personal protection by wearing bright long pants and long sleeves tops or shirts can also be effective in controlling vectors. Read more on vector control strategies from the sources that you were provided with. The following pictures show different control strategies and recommendations to control vectors. Mosquito larval activity as a result of container left unattended and has accumulated water enough for mosquitoes to can breed. Fogging as a control measure. Water container storages. These promote larval activities together with stagnant water. Avoid all these kind of behaviors. The following are biological information required for vector control. You will need to know the breeding sites of these vectors. You will also need to know the resting sites, the transmission times, the blood source, dispersal range, and population dynamics. In order to carry a successful surveillance and monitoring of vectors, you will require the following. You will require proper vector mapping, identifying the specific foci, identification of the breeding sites. You will need to do the survey, set up indicators as well as data management that can inform the program. Finally, ladies and gentlemen, let us look at the integrated vector management characteristics. These include factors influencing local vector biology, disease transmission, and mobility. The use of range of interventions, often combination and synergistically. Collaboration with health sectors and other public-private sectors that impact on vectors. You'll also look into engaging with local communities and other stakeholders. And lastly, the public health regulatory and legislative framework.